This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Well, it all comes down to this as we welcome you to a very special edition of Real Talk. It is the 28th of April. As we live stream this, as we put this podcast out, it is Election Day, and we're grateful to have you here with us. There's a lot happening. There are stories to be written. All of the prognostications, all of the polling, irrelevant as we prepare to find out what millions of Canadians will decide when it comes to the composition of our next federal government and who will lead it. Coming up in just a moment, Supriya Dwivedi, wonderful friend of this show, will go back-to-back jacks with Senator Charles Adler after that, and the technical producer of this show, John Hicks. We'll talk a little hockey, we'll talk a little sports, we'll talk a little real life a little bit later on in the show, because the lead today is Election Day, but the Edmonton Oilers as well, saving their season with an incredible overtime goal, pushing this series with the Los Angeles Kings 2-2, and I quite frankly would like to pat both of us on the back for even being here in front of microphones right now. You holding court in front of thousands of people yesterday. I was lucky enough to be in the barn. The entire city right now, and I think part of it has to do with the fact that it's an election. Part of it has to do with playoff hockey, but there's a real vibe. There's a real energy coursing through this studio. How are you feeling right now?
The city is riding high, and I am a court low.
Yes, you are a court low. I'm grateful to have you here. Wonderful weekend, Alzheimer's Pro-Am as well over the weekend. A ton of Real Talkers showing up to say hi and to show their support, raising over $1 million for the Alzheimer's Society. So a lot to talk about, a lot to get excited about. But today we're going to be talking about not just who's going to win. Everybody can make their predictions, but what really jumps out about the campaign? Who was it that established themselves as credible or set themselves apart? What were some of the big gaffes? What are some of the implications? What's going to happen to the party leaders that not only don't win today, but maybe don't have the showing that their party members are expecting? We'll be spending some time in the Real Talk live chat. We have some emails in right now to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Blah Sheep was down at the Polyev rally and reports from that. We've got Jared making some election predictions. We're going to have some fun with this episode, which is made possible, by the way, with the presenting sponsorship of Alberta's top online real estate school. That's Relo, RELO.ca is where you can find them, where better real estate training starts. Real estate learning online for the bold and ambitious. No matter where you are in your career, they're going to help you find the next level. Residential, commercial, they've got you covered. If you're sick of limited earning potential, if you're sick of the cubicle life and you're looking for a new challenge, a new opportunity, the best place to start is Relo. They've got a team of online instructors ready to help you with every stage of the process. You're going to get your fundamentals course covered. You're going to get your practical course covered. And if you're signing up for their bundles, this is the best way to keep money in your pocket. The commercial or residential real estate bundle, they're going to shoot you $100 back for each of them if you use that promo code Ryan100. That's all one word, Ryan100, when you get started today at Relo.ca. All right, well, she's a longtime talk radio host and a television pundit, most recently a senior advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and, of course, co-host of the very popular Seriously podcast. One of the show's best friends, it's Supriya Dwivedi making time for us on this Election Day, and it's so nice to see your face. Are you feeling the energy out there in Ontario as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think folks are very, very aware that there's an election going on and are looking to cast their vote in a way that I don't think I've seen this level of engagement or excitement, at least in the last, 10 years. The last time I can really remember folks being this engaged would have honestly been 2015.
So do you think, are you saying folks engaged across the political spectrum, like folks are engaged regardless of how they're going to vote today?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I'm in terms of, obviously, I lean more to the left side of the spectrum. So I hear quite a bit from liberals and progressives. But in terms of what I'm hearing, it's just like across the board, folks are engaged. If you're conservative, then you're super motivated to get out and vote, right? Because, the last 10 years haven't really been your cup of tea.
Yeah, no kidding. And I know that for a lot of people, this is the day that they've been counting down, the day that they can expel the Liberal government after the 10 years, the decade that Pierre Poilievre has been talking about it. And for the Liberals, this is a big day. Maybe there are some parallels to what Johnny and I are talking about with playoff hockey and the Oilers saving their season. Mark Carney's trying to save the Liberals' time in government, looking for that fourth term. Generally speaking, you've obviously been paying attention to the campaigns over the past number of weeks. How would you characterize the storylines, or what was the theme, would you say, from your point of how the campaign played out?
I think the main sort of storyline that plays out for me is just how different this election has been compared to most other elections, certainly in my lifetime. And the reason why I say that is because gaffes and certain missteps, if you will, were certain, like, easily forgotten, I would say, in this election campaign, because there has been sort of that singular focus on Trump and tariffs and economic uncertainty and, threats about Canada's sovereignty and annexation. So a lot of the, stuff that we would have spent more time on in other elections, we didn't really do that this time around. In the lead up, if folks joined the live stream before you guys actually went live, they would have heard you talking about Buttongate that happened a couple of weeks ago at the Manning conference, and that certainly, I think, would have been a bigger deal and a bigger through line in the election campaign. I think the fact that Carney says that he misspoke after his one and only call with Trump about whether or not the 51st state stuff was brought up, I think that would have been a bigger deal in any other normal election cycle. I think the lying about crowd sizes would have probably garnered a little bit more attention too from the conservative side of things. So just a lot of stuff that were blips certainly here and there, but didn't really pierce through in terms of anything longer than like a 24 or 36 hour news cycle story. We
were talking to Karima Saad late last week about her interaction with the so-called Brantford Boomer, the guy that issued the double banger outside the Liberal rally. And she was actually kind of, it seemed like a little bit out of nowhere as we were talking to her, quite critical of mainstream media coverage of the election. You've worked in mainstream media for many, many years. You've got a ton of experience in print, television, and radio. What was your assessment of how the campaign was covered, the campaigns, I should say, and did it feel any different to you in 2025 than it did in 21 or any of the prior elections?
Yeah, and I mean, I think the fact that the Conservatives booted off all mainstream media from their, from their campaign was quite odd. I don't think that was something that other election cycles we've really seen. And I think in terms of some of the humanizing, and I'm putting that in air quotes, coverage that you often will see on a campaign bus or on a plane, where it's these lighter moments with the candidate, you don't really get those unless you're on the plane as media, right? And are able to cover it. I think that, if the polls are right and the Conservatives do indeed lose and blew their, 20-ish, 25-point lead or whatever it is that they had going into this election, I think there will be a lot of questions raised about whether their media strategy was in fact the right one by only, opening themselves up to very friendly partisan right-wing media to begin with.
It's been suggested that the ballot box question today for the majority of voters, or at least for a considerable number of them, will have something to do with Donald Trump. The president of the United States, just a short time ago this morning from his Truth Social account, posting, "Good luck to the great people of Canada. Elect the man who has the strength and wisdom to cut your taxes in half, increase your military power for free to the highest level in the world. Have your cars, steel, aluminum, lumber, energy, and all other businesses quadruple in size with zero tariffs or taxes if Canada becomes the cherished 51st state of the United States of America." This is Election Day, by the way, everybody. This is the President of the United States on Canada's Election Day posting this. He says, "No more artificially drawn line from many years ago. Look how beautiful this landmass would be. Free access with no border. All positives with no negatives. It was meant to be," he says. America can no longer subsidize Canada with the hundreds of billions of dollars a year we've been spending in the past. It makes no sense unless Canada is a state. That's Donald Trump this morning. Who, if anybody, does this help? Who, if anybody, does this hurt the morning of Election Day?
I don't think it helps anyone, quite frankly. I think I've seen arguments be made that it's helpful to the Liberal camp and it's helpful to the Carney camp. But like as Canadians as a whole, I don't think it really helps us for him to sort of interject and to have these weird, toilet rants that he has in the morning on his Truth Social account. I think if you're talking about, the conservative camp, it's very odd to me that through the entirety of this campaign, when it was clear that the ballot box question had very much changed to who is going to be best placed to deal with Trump, that they never pivoted. If you saw what Pierre Poilievre tweeted out today, which is something to the effect of, stay out of our election, Canada will never be a 51st state, et cetera, like that should have been his tone from the jump. But of course, he couldn't really do that because of the way the conservative base has very much warmed up to Trump in a way that we don't see in other political parties. But I honestly, like for Trump to do this, it's like, it's very Trumpian, obviously, like there's no rhyme or reason to it. But the overwhelming response from all Canadian politicians should be get fucked, like stay the fuck out of our election.
Yeah.
And I would love to see some sort of statement from one of our democratic institutions about this on foreign interference.
Here's Poilievre's tweet for everyone listening on the podcast. President Trump, stay out of our election. The only people who will decide the future of Canada are Canadians at the ballot box. Says Poilievre, Canada will always be proud, sovereign, and independent. We will never be the 51st state. Today, Canadians can vote for change so we can strengthen our country, stand on our own 2 feet, and stand up to America from a position of strength. The golf ad, the two fellas on the at the driving range talking about we're not going to give these clowns a 4th term, are we? I thought that was clapping back the Conservatives' effort, I think in a candid and casual way, of trying to refocus that conversation in the last 2 weeks of the campaign, of trying to get people to stop talking so much about Donald Trump and focusing a little bit more on the issues at home. What's your assessment of the late stage, the final couple of weeks, the ad campaigns, and the approach that the two main campaigns, the Liberals and the Conservatives, took?
It's interesting because if you look at what the conservative sort of strategy has seemingly been up until this point, it's been to bank on the fact that they believe, whether that bears out in reality or not, but they believe that there is this cohort of, apolitical-ish young men, so Gen Z and younger millennial men, that are going to show up to vote in droves for the Conservatives and propel them to victory because presumably, they can then convince their own social networks, including younger women that they're perhaps, in relationships with, to also vote Conservative. And so it strikes me as odd that the ad that they decided to sort of release kind of looks like a Cialis ad with 2 older guys, out on the golf range talking about what the future will hold or whatnot, instead of really focusing in on who they believe their core demo to be. But it's clear that Carney did the one thing that Trudeau has been struggling with basically since 2015, which is boomer men. And if the Conservatives lose boomer men, then I mean it's over. And the Liberals are going to probably coast to a pretty safe majority for government. So I don't know, like this whole thing has just been weird, right? Like the Conservatives, if you're looking at the campaign they're running, it's like, do they see the polls? And then you have to ask yourself, well, they probably don't believe that they're losing to the degree that the polls are saying they are. So what are their internals saying? What kind of, conversations are they having over there at CPC HQ for them to be so adamant about not pivoting in a way that I think a lot of Canadians were expecting them to pivot at some point?
Before we get in, I want to ask you some questions on potential outcomes and the like. We're talking to Supriya Dwivedi, if you're just joining us on the Real Talk live stream presented by California Closets. Had a chance to talk to Jagmeet Singh in studio just a few episodes ago. Brings a ton of energy to the room, obviously. Yeah. Very likable guy, very, affable guy. And I don't think you can't rip him for a lack of energy. Like I saw some posts and some videos through the campaign. He's just trying like hell to get people excited and get people dancing. And for whatever reason, I mean, I think some of the reasons might be obvious, but it just didn't seem to resonate. Maybe there will be some sort of a resurrection story that will play out as polls start to return. Who knows? But I'm curious to pick your brain on what you think that, what your observations on the NDP campaign, on Mr. Singh's leadership, and maybe the future of the party. It looks like they're poised for a pretty tough result.
Yeah, and you can't help but sort of feel for them, right? Because, I mean, if you look at some of the policy wins that the NDP would have had throughout the last, couple of years, they did indeed push the Liberals to do certain things, and were there for, whether we're talking about national food, we're talking about pharmacare, we're talking about the expansion of dental care. These were all ostensibly done with the support of the NDP, and I think Jagmeet Singh and the NDP can hold their heads up high when it comes to that, which is why I think when he did decide to rip up that SACA deal, the supply and confidence agreement that they had with the Liberals, it was quite odd for, I think, a lot of casual observers, because he didn't seem to have a plan after that. And I think since then we've seen the NDP kind of struggle to gain a footing in this election, and they've just been completely drowned out by Carney and Polyev. And quite frankly, I don't see a scenario, let's say even if Jagmeet Singh wins his seat, which is increasingly looking like he will not win his seat, I can't see a scenario in which he stays on. And I think the NDP really has to have a huge conversation amongst themselves about what kind of party do they want to be. Do you just want to be this conscience of Parliament, or do you actually, want to win elections and win seats and get your numbers up?
Hey, can you remind us what was your title or the work that you were doing at McGill when it was like relating to, the whole thing that got you into the PMO with the online harm stuff? And what was that title again that you were using?
I was the Director of Policy and Engagement for the Center for Media Technology and Democracy at McGill University.
Right. So, I want to establish your credibility on this. You've spent a lot of time looking into this. Can you talk to us about this tweet that you sent on the 25th of April regarding a story, an international story, by the way, that gave evidence that Canadians were being bombarded with right-wing online content ahead of voting. And you have some insights into the accounts that were purveyors of this misinformation and the like. It's pretty interesting and obviously a very concerning story.
Yeah, it is. And look, I think we've seen this sort of right-wing tilt, particularly on Twitter, now known as X, since Elon has taken it over, right? It's no secret that in the lead up to the American election, for example, Twitter was quite pro-Trump, and that effectively, Elon used Twitter as a bit of a get out the vote operation for the Trump campaign. And I think what we've seen in the Canadian election in this light, in the same realm, is something like 80% of the content that is on Twitter right now is pro-Polyev and vehemently anti-Carney. And you have to ask yourselves why that is. A lot of the accounts that are driving this content are very clearly bots, so not real people, but inorganic, inauthentic activity that is being, drummed up to give the appearance or the illusion of wider support than there actually is. And if you think about what the Online Harms Act would have done, amongst other things, it would have required platforms like Twitter/X to label bots, so that if you as a consumer or a user of the platform are, scrolling through your timeline and you're coming across all this pro-Polyev content, and let's say it is coming from accounts that are bots, they would be labeled as such. So you would know that it's not a real person behind that account, but it's actually a bot that's driving that. And I think it really, if let's say Carney forms government, and let's say going forward, he wants to do something in this realm when it comes to regulating online social platforms, I think a good lens to do this under, particularly under this current environment that we're in with Trump, is to make it about sovereignty. We can't actually be sovereign from other countries, particularly, American foreign interference at this point, if they control our algorithms and ultimately control the information flow that Canadians are receiving. And, couple that with the fact that you've got Zuckerberg, so head of Meta, being, very anti-Canadian news and has blocked all links from all of Meta's platforms. You've got Elon, who is, Elon, and is right there as an advisor in the White House controlling X. And then you've got like a couple of American billionaires that are essentially controlling the vast majority of our information flow. And I don't think that's healthy, nor do I think it's good for democracy.
Interesting observation here, a question here from Dwayne, who's asking us to ask you what you think comes of Pierre Poilievre if he does not win the election. But then Dwayne goes on to say, if that is the case, it will have had, or Danielle Smith will have had something to do with that. Why don't we start with the second part of Dwayne's comment first, and then we'll circle back. Let me ask you this, just objectively. What role, if any, do you think Alberta's premier played in the federal election?
So I think she definitely played a role. I don't think she played a helpful role for the federal Conservatives, but I don't know if she would have been the tipping point or the straw that broke the camel's back, and choose whatever metaphor you want to use here. I think what's more likely, if Pierre Poilievre does in fact lose, is that they were just unable to pivot. The guy only has one gear, which is I drink Liberal tears for breakfast, terminally online, attack dog. And as the ballot question shifted from, carbon tax or whatever, to this current environment with sovereignty and 51st state and who's going to stand up to Trump, he was just unable to read the room. And I think that, it'll be interesting to see what happens if he loses, because Pierre does very much embody the current ethos and the current, I guess, thinking of the Conservative Party. He won quite handedly. And up until the fact that you had these dips in his polling, you didn't have a lot of folks coming out with, a lot of objections to the way him and his, senior people around him were conducting themselves. So it'll be really interesting to see how the knives come out for him, if they do come out for him, because unlike with a guy like O'Toole, for example, they can't exactly accuse Pierre of being like a red Tory or like a secret liberal or anything like that. Like, this guy is as blue as it gets. So it'll be a reckoning, I think, for the party as a whole. Could
be a different scenario too. There's obviously many different potential outcomes here. Liberal majority, liberal minority, conservative majority, conservative minority. If it's say hypothetically a liberal minority government, then Pierre Poilievre's perspective could be entirely different than a liberal majority, right? If the suggestion is that there could be another election in 18 months, different story than an election 4 or 5 years from now.
Yeah, totally. And I think that'll likely factor into whether or not folks are shining knives or sharpening knives as we speak,
Yeah, for sure. So there's the Danielle Smith angle, which is interesting. Probably, I don't know, maybe a little bit more relevant at the beginning of the campaign. It seems like Alberta's premier's been relatively quiet for the past couple of weeks. I think probably the other premier that had his fair share of the spotlight, in particular in the tariff context, you know exactly where I'm going with this, Doug Ford. There's a lot of people out here in Alberta, and this is anecdotal, okay? Anecdotal. I have had conversations with several people, conservatives, that are curious to see what the future of Doug Ford might look like on the federal stage. Now, we're getting way ahead of ourselves right now, but you live in that province. You're seeing it firsthand. I have to ask for your take on Doug Ford's performance over the past 6 weeks or so, and what you think might be motivating it aside from the obvious.
I mean, do we want to state the obvious? What we think is motivating it?
What's the obvious?
I don't think he likes Pierre Poilievre or Jenny Byrne very much, and I think that's what's likely motivating a lot of this. I mean, look, aside from, he made comments very recently to Politico about being just flabbergasted at the fact that Pierre did not make any sort of effort to, have relationships with either local politicians, with premiers, with local councillors, with anyone really, that they were going to just kind of go in and steamroll it. And that's the comment that's garnering quite a bit of attention online from political watchers that Ford made to Politico. But I would say that the other sort of, interesting aspect to all of this is that I think it was last week or that there was, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, but the Ontario government put out a statement basically saying that if the childcare agreements were not going to be, funded and renewed come 2026, a bunch of folks were going to lose their subsidized daycare spots. And that might as very well have been just one giant, picture of a middle finger to Poilievre, because that was very much also a bit of a tacit endorsement of the, an OG Trudeau Liberal plan, but the Liberal plan that the Carney government plans on carrying through on. So he's been very active throughout this. And I also am very curious to see where Ford's future lays, particularly if he does ever seem interested in making the jump to federal politics. A guy like Ford is very much a blue conservative, and yet is able to, garner votes from more centrist or more middle of the road voters. And I think part of it's because he's not terminally online the way I think a lot of current, federal conservatives are. But he's also just like an affable, normal guy. Who is, willing to shake anyone's hand and is going to sit down and have a conversation with anyone. And I don't think you could say that about the current federal conservative leader.
Yeah. Gilles watching us in our live chat powered by Park Power. He says conservative social policy won't fly for long term in Ontario. Says Mark Carney taking the economic policy away from the Conservatives had a big impact in Ontario. You're there. Is Gilles right?
I don't know exactly what that means, if I'm being honest.
About him taking the economic policy away, or about their social policy?
Yeah, about him taking the economic policy away.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, my guess is what a lot of people have been suggesting, I think, is that Carney came in and on a couple of fronts, probably including like GST on homes, maybe the carbon tax as well, kind of like the way that people put it candidly is like stole a couple ideas. He stole a couple ideas. I'm assuming that's what Gil's looking to.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
He lopped off a lot of Poilievre's messaging at the knees. He kind of handcuffed him a little bit. It's axe the tax, and then he's like, okay, and then he did it.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so I think that's why I was confused, because in fairness to Carney, he's mentioned all that during the Liberal leadership race, right? About axing the carbon tax, and as well as getting rid of the higher inclusion rate for capital gains. Both of those were in his acceptance speech when he won the leadership. And I think both Freeland and Karina Gould would have also pledged to get rid of the carbon tax during that campaign. So, I mean, that was going to be DOA, like it was going to be dead on arrival, the carbon tax either way, irrespective of who won the Liberal leadership race. But yeah, I mean, in terms of if conservatives feel as though Carney is cribbing their policies, that's a completely valid, I guess, take. But then they have to ask themselves why folks are so much more willing to receive that sort of policy message from a guy like Carney as opposed to a guy like Poilievre. And I think it comes down to likability and the fact that Poilievre ultimately, for a lot of folks, still looks like the guy you would want to shove in a middle school locker.
Do you have any insight into
whether
Carney
he was shoved in a middle school locker? No,
being shoved in a middle school locker? I have been shoved in one, and I have done the shoving into one, and I have made amends with the individual who I shoved in. So yeah, that was later in life. But nothing quite like it, especially when you hear the lock go through and you realize, oh no, they're not messing around. Were you ever shoved into a locker?
No, but Pierre looks like he's the type of guy who does the shoving, if I have to say.
He might be both. He might be both as well. He may have ridden both sides of that rail. Hey, another, like, off track, but it's okay. Like, election day, there's only so much we can talk about until we see the results. And so pardon me for exploring a couple angles that maybe the mainstream shows won't tackle at this stage. But another prominent politician that has spent more time inserting themselves into the spotlight and the national discourse more than usual is one that we haven't heard from for a couple of years. And that's former Alberta Premier and former senior Harper Cabinet Minister Jason Kenney, who's all of a sudden been offering up more hot takes than normal on the tariff situation, on the Alberta separation or Alberta sovereignty conversation, pulling no punches, by the way. He's been really putting himself out there. Some people in this part of the country out west are starting to wonder what that might mean, if anything. Has anyone in Ontario been paying attention to that?
Yeah, I think what's really caught a lot of folks' eyes here, perhaps not whether or not he's going to, jump back into stuff. I think it's more just, wow, look at this. There is, in fact, very blue, very conservative folks from all over the country that can employ language that shows that they're willing to stand up for Canada's sovereignty and to stand up to Donald Trump and to the, Maple MAGA movement and to all the Trump cosplayers in Canada that are willing to, sell out our country for, I don't know, a shot at being a colony. Like, I'm not really sure what the 51st state kind of gets us, but it's nice to see, ex-politicians, current politicians of all stripes kind of really, wrap themselves in the flag in a way that I think is helpful at this time. And I'll be curious to see where a guy like Jason Kenney lands, because I mean, he certainly is no stranger to the notion of a party's leader being eaten by their base, right?
Yeah, no kidding. I want to ask you this. So, if let's say a hypothetical Liberal win and then a hypothetical Conservative win, in one or two sentences, the implications, like what it means for the country. So why don't we start with if the Liberals win? And if you want to, put an asterisk, whether it's a minority or majority or whatever, you go ahead. But what are the implications of a Liberal win?
So I think the implications of a Liberal win, whether it's a minority or a majority government, I mean, majority especially, but even if it's just a minority government, I think the Liberals can really hold their heads high, considering we were on the face of just obliteration, right? In terms of seats and seat count. And I think the way that the Carney campaign has been, quite disciplined and quite good at running what has been ostensibly a front runner campaign, they can be very proud of what they've done and what they've accomplished. If the Conservatives win, it will be a real question about the accuracy, I think, of polling in this country and how much mainstream and legacy media tend to rely on polling as sort of election fodder and, panel fodder. But I also think it'll be somewhat of a vindication for the Conservatives that, you can, in fact, run an a-hole candidate that only has one gear. And you can still have that be a winnable and a viable strategy.
Yeah. I'll hop into live chat here. By the way, Johnny, keep this up.
Want to make sure you got this.
Yeah, keep this up. This is interesting. For the people on the podcast, I want to, I'll describe what we're seeing here. Supriya, this is I think they call it a front page wrap, right? This is advertising that you can buy. And this is in a number of newspapers across the country. It sure looks like editorial coverage. It's not clearly marked as an advertisement. It has a picture of Pierre Poilievre and then the headline, "For a Change," in big question marks with a big conservative bar across the front. And the title, as you can read it there, the subheading, can you afford a fourth Liberal term, or do you want a new Conservative government for a change? Now, at the very bottom, obviously, it says this is authorized by the campaign for, to elect Pierre Poilievre. Joanne Nugent, a longtime member of the media in Alberta, across Western Canada, put this on my radar earlier this weekend, describing it as egregious, preposterous. What are your thoughts on this?
I agree. It's egregious. I think campaign ads should be clearly marked as such. And I think it's insidious when it's presented in another way, so that if you're just a regular, everyday, average voter, you're not necessarily going to clue into the fact that your local paper is shilling for the Conservatives because it's an ad and not because that's what the ed board or that's what their lead columnist or whomever has thought to put on the front of the paper. But I would say that this has happened in previous elections with Post Media, where, in the lead up to the election, you do have these sort of wraps that are a little less than, apparent that that's exactly what they are. And I think for all of the whining and all of the bitching that we hear from Conservatives about this apparent left-wing bias in all media, I think we can call bullshit when the majority of our papers are owned by Post Media and they do this kind of thing. Like what? And you have all the algos backing you from these large American tech companies. So maybe stop whining and knock doors and learn how to win elections.
Also, who buys a paper anymore? Like, who are they targeting here? Grandma,
Great question.
Grandma Jenkins? Like, what is this?
Well, but actually maybe. Yeah. And although I will say my parents still get paper copies, like they get the newspaper delivered to their house. And when I'm down there visiting and making an Americano and actually sitting and like flipping through the newspaper, it takes me back in time and I actually love it.
But like that was my first thought, is like the only people that would believe this are people who like maybe would also believe like AI or something. Like it looks like an ad.
Different
right?
ways of targeting an audience for sure. Okay, so we've asked you the implications there of a liberal win, right? The implications of a conservative win in a couple of sentences.
The implications of a conservative win, I think, will be interesting because I think you're going to have a good chunk of their base that doesn't actually want Poilievre to take too much of a hard line with Trump. And it'll be a harder balancing act, I think, for the conservatives to sort of ensure that the more rightward of their base and their flank is, still supporting them while also, really actually standing up to Trump and ensuring that Canada in the renegotiation of NAFTA doesn't get a raw deal. So the implications, I think, are like the stakes are high no matter who wins. And I think the fact is that Trump is this, he's unpredictable and is the kind of guy that will fly by the seat of his pants. And I think whomever wins is going to have a rough ride for the next little bit. Not just dealing with Trump, but dealing with the sort of fallout of the breakdown of the entire geopolitical world order.
I don't know how much you're allowed to answer this, but we have a question just emailed into us. Somebody asking for the inside scoop from a former senior advisor to the guy, wondering if you can let us know what's Justin Trudeau up to now. What do you think Justin Trudeau's doing today?
I think he was in Newfoundland over the weekend, if I'm being honest.
What's his plan over the next year, do you think?
Friends. What's his plan over the next year?
Yeah.
Sleep in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think to sleep a little bit. He's going to do the things that he likes to do. So I think he's going to spend a lot more time with his kids. He's going to relax a little bit and kind of figure out what his next moves are. But because I noticed there were a few folks online being like, he was totally silent this campaign. I mean, he was door knocking in Papineau for Marjorie Michel, who's the candidate there. And, he did so with gusto. But I think the guy also knows that, he's deserving of a vacation and a little bit of time off, He
likes to go to Canadian Tire.
Yeah, this March 17th post on Instagram was when I thought it was just funny to see. It's like the guy's like a former prime minister of Canada. He's like the leader of a G7 nation, and he's in there. And I'm like, I don't know, like everybody else, but I was like zooming in on the picture to see what he was buying.
He's got like a gardening stuff and spatulas.
Stocking up a new apartment.
Yeah,
he's
like
getting
a condo.
The basic, he's getting like the basic kitchen setup. But I like one of the things he bought was a hand mixer. So I don't know.
Those are great.
Is he a from scratch guy, Supriya? Does he do his own cooking?
He's doing his own hummus.
So he's very much a from scratch guy. I can share that for folks that would have seen his Halloween posts where his youngest son was dressed as Frankenstein and he was on these stilts and these really long pants. The PM sewed those pants and for him.
Really?
And yes. And in fact, we had a meeting and it was going late. We were in the West Block office. It was like 7 p.m. It was like the last week of October. And he leaves and he's like, hey guys, thanks so much for staying late. I got to go watch YouTube videos now on how to sew pants.
We showed it on the show. And I remember like, this was like, he was getting a lot of flack in the last few years, but he was getting a lot of flack that week. And then that post went up and I always read the comments underneath and I was like, wow, they're actually, cause like parents just related. They were like, okay. Yeah. Some of the comments were even like, I fucking hate you, but this is adorable.
That's the kind of compliment. Is it? You're like, thanks.
Yeah, I guess. Right. Yeah.
Thanks. RH, by the way, shout out to RH, $50 into our YouTube super chat. Sure, appreciate that. Says performative politics as usual will not be enough to defend Canada. There needs to be a wartime effort in everything from industrial to housing policy. Says I'm not convinced any of the parties are ideologically capable of doing what's necessary. Any response to that?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think we should have a wartime effort. And I think that in a lot of ways, all of the federal political parties are perhaps I don't know if I wouldn't call it a naivete. I think, at least in the liberal sense, it's folks are aware and folks know what's exactly at stake and the real risk here. But if I can be quite honest, I don't know if the Canadian electorate writ large is actually fully willing to embrace the wartime effort. Now, leaders lead, obviously. And so it'll be interesting to see whomever forms government, if their rhetoric and their vision for what a wartime effort actually looks like, if that changes in the early days of having to deal with President Trump.
I wanted to ask, look at this. We've got an interesting question here. Audience member wondering, this is Blah Sheep. What do you think of the Toronto Police and other organizations endorsing Poilievre? I'm just trying to track down the exact piece here because the word endorsement. Poilievre thanks the Toronto Police Association, the latest association to endorse the Conservative plan to stop the crime, announcing a plan to give law enforcement the power to dismantle dangerous and illegal tent cities to save lives and restore safe streets. We were commenting on the show, a couple of weeks ago, how it was right around the time that Poilievre, vowed to invoke Section 33 of the Charter and basically to invoke the notwithstanding clause to keep, mass killers behind bars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We can obviously get into the weeds. We talked to experts on it, people pointing out there's not exactly like a lot of examples of mass killers being paroled and being set free, but I digress. But it was, I think, a concerted and obviously prominent effort on behalf of the Conservatives to refocus the election and to talk about crime and the fact that whether you're talking to folks in rural areas or people right in downtown Toronto or Edmonton, for that matter, Supriya, a lot of Canadians just don't feel safe. We've also talked a little bit about the climate, but not a ton. Are you surprised at some of the issues that weren't as prominent through the campaign as you thought they might be?
Yeah, we didn't really talk about healthcare, did we? All that much?
Not really.
And I know I mentioned this during the 2021 election when you and I were talking about this, and then but it's weird that there was no prominent feature of healthcare in this election when basically every province is not meeting, I think, what most Canadians would, grade as our ideal standard for healthcare. I don't think we spent a lot of time talking about the climate. I don't think we actually spent a lot of time talking about national security and foreign interference, weirdly enough, after, we had a public inquiry into foreign interference. And it was very much the subject of, national discourse for quite some time in the lead up to this. But that's what happens when you've got a sentient Cheeto in the White House popping off Truth Social posts at every hour of the day, is that it just sucks up all the oxygen out of the room. And that ends up being the main sort of focus for everyone.
Yeah, no kidding.
Hashtag sentient Cheeto.
Sentient Cheeto. You give us one every time you're on. Rage Boner was one of our more popular hashtags. We almost screened T-shirts based on popular demand when you were talking about the Rage Boner. By the way, we want to welcome Blah Sheep now as an official Real Talker, a member of our YouTube channel. You can check out our YouTube homepage and sign up, find out the benefits and perks that come with YouTube membership. Supriya, sometimes we have questions for you, and then a lot of the times when we talk, we're just kind of coming together and talking about something. I don't have a question here, but the entire nation was rocked on Saturday, and certainly being described as one of the darkest days, if not the darkest day, in Vancouver's history on Saturday, as a man, police allege, the man now facing 8 murder charges, ran his vehicle through the Lapu Lapu Festival in Vancouver, killing at least 11 people, injuring dozens more. It's an absolutely horrific situation. And obviously not just the Filipino community in Vancouver, but I think the entire country feeling this one. We do know, based on what police have told us, that this individual, Kaiji Adam Low, had dozens of interactions with police relating to his deteriorating mental health. His brother was murdered last year. His mom later attempted suicide. Police said that it was not a terror attack. What's the question here? I guess, how are you wrapping your mind around it, and where's your heart at?
I mean, my heart's with all of Vancouver and the entirety of the Filipino community, as well as just Canadians everywhere. I think it was, for folks of us on the East Coast, I woke up to that news the next morning, and it was, you just feel your heart go into your stomach. And then you start reading about the range and ages of the victims and thinking about what it must have been like at this, like, lively outdoor festival where folks are just, chilling and vibing with your neighbors and your community. And to have that kind of carnage unfold, not only what that does to the families of the victims, but think about the ongoing trauma that the folks that were there on the ground are now going to have to deal with, that witnessed it. When you experience trauma, there are all sorts of little triggers that folks can have, everything from like the smell of what was cooking in the background as they saw something unfold, or the background sound of folks that were probably trying to get out of the way. So I like, this is a very, very dark chapter for Canada, and I think it's one of these things that we can come out of it stronger. And I think we'd be wise. And I was quite disappointed to see so many folks initially try and politicize this, but I'm glad that doesn't seem to be now the overwhelming sort of sentiment or conclusion here.
Yeah, so well said as always. It's so good to see you again. Appreciate your insights on this election day. It's obviously a big one. Where are you going to be watching tonight? What's your plan? What does election night look like for Supriya?
My kid's kind of sick, if I'm being honest. So I was going to go to an election watch party, but I think I might have to just be a boring mom and watch it on TV.
There's nothing wrong with that. Watching an election in sweatpants is like totally okay.
That's a dream. Yeah.
It's the dream. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for doing this.
Always a pleasure, Ryan. Talk soon.
All right, Supriya. That's Supriya Dwivedi, obviously longtime political pundit, media commentator, television, radio, and print, and most recently senior advisor to Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Senator Charles Adler in just a second, plus we'll be getting to more of your comments on the live chat. Some of you letting us know. Goose, by the way, Johnny chimed in. He's streaming the show right now through his headphones as he is walking to the polling station. So Goose is going to go vote. I saw an interesting one from Randy here in the live chat. Randy reporting not only that he did vote, but who he voted for. And I think that this is significant. And I'm not going to start doing the thing of everybody reporting who they voted for, because that's anecdotal and we could misportray where the
tell
audience
us in the chat.
is at.
Tell us.
But what about this? It's interesting. If you let us know you voted differently for the first time, I think that's kind of interesting. So Randy letting us know that he has voted Liberal today for the first time. So that's kind of interesting. Randy, if you want to follow up with us, let us know, what was it that convinced you to move your vote? And did you lend your vote, Randy? Did you lend it? Or are you now a card-carrying member of the Liberal Party of Canada? Because those can be two different things as well. A lot of folks today are going to be doing the strategic voting thing. They're going to vote where they think that they can help either the progressive or the conservative cause the most.
Yeah,
right?
I was looking at polling at our friend Philippe Fournier's website there. The what is it, 38?
Yeah, 338 Canada.
And it's crazy because now they're marking, like, I love how they mark like where Trudeau resigned, where Carney became the leader, where the campaign set off. And at each mark ticker, you can see just a little of each other party, Green, Independent, Bloc, whoever they are, all tick down, just a tick every time a significant thing happened. Just another little tick, which to me means a few more people, a few more hundred, maybe 1,000, are jumping ship and going over and making sure that their vote counts with either the Liberals or maybe the Conservatives. Like, this is a two-horse race.
It's a two-horse race.
This is,
although the NDP candidates don't want us saying that, that's for sure.
we didn't say it when Singh was here, but
Hey,
sorry,
it's well, no. Actually, to be fair, you didn't say who the two horses are, so there you go. It's fair coverage.
And
Chelsea the Ginge says, I chose to not cast a strategic vote. I voted for the party whose platform I align with the most. That from Chelsea the Ginge.
I wanted to ask you, because obviously it came out near the end of the week, and then over the weekend now everyone's making hoop. But what do you think of Jagmeet with his whole kind of his self expose on why he did everything, and now explaining it? Do you think it was good to wait, or should he have done it right away, kind of thing?
Yeah. So good question. And Jagmeet Singh basically did an interview with the Globe. I think it was Robert Fife, but with the Globe, where he basically said, I put Canada ahead of the NDP. I
Didn't
put
want
Canada
to
ahead of my
let
party.
Pierre get that control.
Right. And yeah, I thought it was interesting. You know whose take on it I was most interested to hear was Shannon Phillips. She and Ken Bosenkool joined us our final episode of last week, and you can check that out. Shannon, obviously former NDP cabinet minister provincially, letting us know she thought it was honorable. I thought it was kind of interesting. It's been a weird election for NDP supporters for sure. Yeah. Will says I'm voting Liberal as a strategic thing. Says I don't like the local candidate, but I'd rather see Mark Carney win. How about this from Bunny Slippers? Number one, Bunny, we saw your post earlier. Bunny said, please, guys, give me a heads up if Trudeau's going to be on any of the dating apps. Bunny Slippers wants to know. We'll get you the inside scoop. Maybe our Patreon supporters will give you the heads up on when former high-profile politicians are back on the dating market. But Bunny's going to be watching election results come in tonight with a bowl of poutine, which sounds like a pretty Canadian thing to do.
These are all chill, but like you and me both know political crazies, political wackos who are like literally they're going to a pub, they are going to sit there, drink, and yell at screens like this is like their Super Bowl, right? This is the Canadian election Super Bowl.
100%.
I wanted to ask you one question before you go to Charles Adler. He's right here. I can't. Oh, look at his beautiful face. How is your? I didn't ask you about your riding. Is that a tight race? The one you're voting in, or
is it a tight race? I mean, geez, it depends on who you talk to, man, right? Because I've been talking so much about my riding Edmonton Center, and today we're going to find out what happens. So if this is your first time checking out Real Talk, if you've not heard me, basically in one sentence, the candidate with the most name recognition is the candidate probably of the top three least favored to win, Tricia Esterbrook's reputable candidate. Yeah. The Liberal incumbent, Randy Boissonneau, not running. Mark Carney says, you're not running. You're fired. Randy says his family decided that he wouldn't run, but everybody knows what happened there. So you've got a long time, and she's credible and she's fine. Long-time Liberal volunteer, donor. She's a lawyer, Eleanor Olszewski, but frankly, like honestly, no offense, but like nobody knows who she is, generally speaking, and nobody knows who the Conservative candidate is, Saeed Ahmed, because to his credit, he out-organized the former Conservative MP, James Cumming, who wanted to be there. So you've got and respectfully, guys, I'm just going to speak freely. You've got a no-name Conservative candidate. You've got a no-name Liberal candidate. So
it could be.
And then you've got an NDP candidate who is a name, but she's going to have a hard time convincing people to vote for her. So I don't know what the fuck's going to happen. It is a toss-up.
And mine is, I've got the Conservative Tim Uppal. I think he's won the last 3 times or something like that. I don't know. But it's been pretty conservative. My riding's a Gateway, but like I live in Summerside. But now, because of Mark Carney, like the day after Mark Carney joined the race, now there's a Liberal in there. And I just look at polling again at Philippe Fournier's. I love that he pointed me to his website because now I just keep going there you could literally type in a riding and it's literally neck and neck right now. So the Conservatives kind of, again, it's a toss-up in my riding as well. I don't know what's going to happen.
338canada.com as of today. This is a polling aggregator, so take it for what it's worth. This is obviously not official. This is obvious. This could be blown out of the water and completely incorrect.
No, but they don't. They say likely,
his
unsure.
Track record's pretty good
for sure.
But it's showing 6 Liberal seats in Alberta. We'll know tomorrow, but that would represent a 300% increase for the Liberals in Alberta. Still 29 Conservatives if it happens. So we'll see. And by the way, you're being called out. You're being called to the carpet by Don in our live chat, Johnny, and it's fair. Don says, Johnny, the Super Bowl, he says, where's the elbows up, guys? He says, it's the Grey Cup for Canadian politicos today. It's the Grey Cup for Canadian.
Okay.
There you go.
Sorry.
Don's making sure we got CanCon. We got our Canadian content covered. I can't wait to get to the purveyor and, the man who delivered Canadian common sense to millions of people for many, many years. He's now serving his country as an elected, just kidding, Senator Charles Adler, arguably the show's best friend. We're talking to pretty much the show's 2 best friends today in Charles and Supriya. We love these two. Charles has been a senator for less than a year, and he's going to give us his take on this in just a quick second. First, I have to let you know that this show simply would not be happening without the amazing support of the team at North Road Investment Council. Now, if you're kind of the average Canadian, a lot of Canadians Canadians are seeing their investment advice or financial planning advice delivered through a bank, right, or a bank-owned brokerage firm. But the team at North Road Investment Council wants to give successful savers and successful investors a chance to experience wealth management advice on a platform, get this, of true independence. Through the support of professionals with CFP and CFA designations, your financial plan delivered in connection to an hourly fee, which is great, not from commissions paid from investment products. It's one of the many things that sets North Road Investment Council apart. Life's financial journey doesn't always follow a straight path. They're your fiduciary financial advisors, strategic approaches to wealth management that'll align with your vision. You can track them down at northroadic.com. California Closets, the best in the business when it comes to custom closets and storage solutions for the entire home. Proudly Canadian-owned and operated. You know, if you have a California Closets installation going into your living room, your primary bedroom, your entertainment room, your second, wherever it is, the garage, they do amazing work. You can do it with the confidence knowing that every installation manufactured right here in Alberta. It's a family-owned business and everything they do is guaranteed for life. You can request a free consultation today at californiaclosets.ca. How about our friends at Friesen Brothers gearing up another first of the month coming up May 1st at all 16 locations, 15% off all your groceries over $75 or more. It's one of the many ways that Friesen Brothers is making sure that families can afford to put good food on the table. You can learn more about the essentials, and I'm talking about the family essentials. It's a flyer that we consult every single week. You can pick it up in store or visit them online at friesen.com. And our friends at Complete Care Restoration reminding you that heaven forbid, if disaster strikes, don't go at it alone. It could be smoke damage through wildfire season. It could be a sewer backup. Heck, maybe you've discovered black mold where you least expected it. The team at Complete Care Restoration has been restoring properties, rebuilding peace of mind for more than a quarter century, establishing themselves as the most credible name in the business. They'll work directly with your insurance company to save you the hassle. Remember, Complete Care Restoration.
Love the care. You know, somebody joking in the chat that I just found the 338 website with Fleet 4. It's not that I just found it. It's just like, before I came on the show, I didn't really give a hoot very much about politics, but I think that just shows what this election is doing to people. Like, now I'm looking at numbers and ridings. Like, this is something I've never done before. I think a lot of people are just more engaged with this election, right?
Yeah. LT, by the way, quick question as we head over to Charles Adler now. LT's wondering, so hang on a second, is Amarjeet, so he's still the mayor of Edmonton, or is he going back to the position if he loses, or what's going on? So LT, here's the deal. Amarjeet, so he will either win and return to Ottawa as a Liberal MP, and quite likely, if the Liberals form government, he quite likely could be a cabinet minister, has been before, and obviously they want to have representation on the prairies. That's a big if. He's not guaranteed to win his riding. If he loses, he's already told us, and he told us on this show, that he will not seek re-election as mayor. He made that very clear. I mean, if he were to change his mind, boy, I think there'd be big blowback there. And plus, he'd get smoked if he tried to pull that. So he said he's not running for mayor again. So if he loses the election, then he'll return to the mayor's office for like 6 months of kind of dead duck mayoring, and then we'll see what happens from there. So the mayoral race in Edmonton, you could argue for Calgary as well, wide open, and obviously Real Talk will have you covered with that coverage. Let's check in with our pal, Senator Charles Adler, an RTDNA Lifetime Achievement Award winner, an Emmy Award winner, and one of the best friends this show has ever known. It's nice to see your face, pal. How have you been? We got you on mute. I got to make sure I can hear you. We got to make sure that we can hear Charles Adler. There you are, pal. I think I can hear you now. There it is. There's okay. That voice we've been craving. Okay. There we go, perfect. Buddy.
All right.
How are you?
I'm good. I just have to keep the phone balanced here, so that's the most difficult challenge I have. Let me just lay down the ethics here. I am not speaking for the Senate.
Yeah.
I'm not speaking for Manitoba. I'm not speaking for the National Hockey League or Donald Trump. and I'm not running for the mayor of Edmonton. So let me just, get all that stuff out of the way.
Okay, so what we're hearing from you is not the official position of the Senate of Canada.
No, it's not.
Hey,
It's the official position of my heart.
Yeah, you've covered like provincially, federally through the years, obviously as a national talk host, many elections. I'm not going to ask you if this one feels different. Let me ask you, how does this one feel different?
Well, this one feels very, very different because the number one issue in the land appears to be somebody who doesn't live in this country. And so I just cannot imagine, outside of maybe, the free trade election, but I'm really stretching here in the 80s. Clearly, the free trade election had to do with our association with the United States and then Mexico. But I just don't recall. Do you recall an election where the elephant in the room is not a Canadian elephant?
Nope. Yeah, not even close. And actually, I feel like there have been, obviously meaningful campaigns and campaigns of substance in past. And as we talk about them, the ballot box questions, it's typically been focused. It's not that the campaigns have lacked focus, but I think that this one has been almost solely focused on the U.S., probably much to the chagrin of the Conservatives, I think, who have been trying to remind people that there are other issues at play. And not that the Liberals are unaware of that or haven't, I think, put some policy in front of Canadians to consider. There's been some policy to consider. In particular, I think probably on housing and affordable housing. I think that's one that comes to mind most prominently. But yeah, it's been interesting to see the directions that the two campaigns move in. It's essentially been a question, what it really boils down to, what I think strategists and political advisors would be saying around the table is you're putting two people in front of Canadians, and for a month, you're having them present themselves as the option to sit across the table from the President of the United States, and really, that's what it comes down to. Who can the average Canadian voter more picture in that role, Carney or Poilievre?
And because most people in the country see it as just a two-person race, that's something that frustrates the hell out of conservatives. It doesn't matter whether you're living in Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba, or anywhere else. Conservatives just know it's political science 101, that unless the NDP gets at least 15%, but somewhere between 15 and 20, it's very difficult for them to punch through because it's a center-left country. That's whether people on the right like to hear it or not, that's kind of the way the country works. So the only way that you punch through is if those two parties, center-left parties, meaning the NDP and the Liberals, if they remain split and relatively powerful, no different than the old days when the Conservatives were split into two parties. And as long as the Progressive Conservatives did reasonably well and Reform or the Alliance did reasonably well, the Liberals would just punch through. So that's kind of the era that we're living in right now. It's got to be very frustrating, I think, for many Conservatives who are watching and listening to this.
What would you? I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves and start acting like we already know what the election result is going to be. But let me just say, in the context of how closely these two parties have polled over the past couple of weeks, like literally within 2-3 points of each other, as one party gains a couple points over a couple of days, the other loses it, and vice versa. I want to ask you about both campaigns, in particular the Conservative campaign, which obviously the main change here, Justin Trudeau's resignation, the leadership race, and then Mark Carney is the new leader. But the Conservatives were polling like more than 20 points ahead of the Liberals. People at one point were wondering whether or not the Liberals might lose official party status, might send fewer than 12 MPs to Ottawa. Now people are talking about it could be 170, could be 180, could be 190 MPs. What do you think that the Conservatives, looking back, may want to have done differently? Or what do you note about the Conservative campaign that ultimately failed to capitalize on that really early lead?
Well, I think the Conservatives would have done much better just being very proactive about what they plan to do, because it doesn't matter how good you are as, let's call it a bomb thrower. We know this from our experience in communications. You've got to do more than throw bombs. Ryan Jesperson throws bombs the odd time, but most of the time your business is about inspiring. And unless you're inspiring, you don't have moral authority. So I think that's, that should have been, I think, the plan B for the Conservatives is find a way to offer an inspiring program to the country, as opposed to rehashing the same old stuff about Trudeau without using Trudeau, but replacing him with Carney. I think that when everyone looks at this, when the autopsy is done on the campaign, I think that's what all intelligent conservatives will conclude, that Plan B had to be something about inspiration, as opposed to just trying to convince people that there's no difference between Carney and Trudeau. And even if substantively there is no difference between Carney and Trudeau, we live in a very visual age. People look at Trudeau, people look at Carney, and for anyone to say, well, they're the same, visually that just doesn't work.
Well, visually it doesn't work, and then also just like based on the resume, it doesn't work either. Like I think for a lot of people, the attacks, and I'm not necessarily saying whether or not I think they were effective attacks, but you heard it a lot from conservatives over the years, or from political opponents of Justin Trudeau. The drama teacher, make Trudeau a drama teacher again.
Yeah.
We saw the hats, right? Before he was doing this, he was a kayak instructor, that sort of idea. You kind of lose the wind out of your sails when you're going to go after a guy like Mark Carney and start to criticize the track record or the CV. So you got to find something else to go at him with. And I'm not surprised they were trying to tie him to Justin Trudeau, because it's the easiest and most obvious plan of attack. The question, I guess, that'll be answered today is whether or not that resonates with Canadians, whether or not Canadians draw the direct line between Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney, his former economic advisor. Interesting to see the whole connection with Stephen Harper too, right? Like Stephen Harper, we should note, did not endorse Aaron O'Toole, did not endorse Andrew Scheer, at least didn't show up on the campaigns to help them out during the election, but he did this time. Why do you think it was different?
I think it was different because I think Stephen Harper realizes that his party, and let's face it, this party, next to his wife Lorene, this is the love of his life. This is his project. He's a founding father of the Conservative Party, and I think he realized that they really need him. I mean, if you examine the races, Scheer, O'Toole, and Trudeau, for those races, the Conservatives were a lot closer. Once again, I'm using, poll numbers here, but the poll numbers in those races were a lot closer in terms of what really matters, which is efficiency, the number of seats. This time, I think Stephen Harper, being a very, very smart guy, realizes that his party needs him more than ever. And so he'll do whatever he can. And so he agreed to do that ad.
They've got an interesting comment here from Randy. Chuck, Randy's watching us live right now on YouTube in our chat, powered by Park Power. He says, let's remember Michael Ignatieff. He was pretty qualified too. You remember those campaigns, obviously the Michael Ignatieff criticism. I may not nail it word for word, but it was basically the attack ad said he didn't come back for you.
Yeah.
They didn't, there were sort of like implications or similar, around Carney, but they didn't directly attack him for that. Why do you think not? Mm-hmm. It proved to be pretty effective against Ignatieff.
Yeah, well, there's blood on my hands on that one, Ryan, because I'm the one who, in my national talk show, kept talking about Ignatieff as the visiting professor. In fact, I stopped calling him by his name. I just said the visiting professor. And then that turned into he's just visiting, and that turned into he's not here for you. So, full disclosure that I'm partially responsible for that caricature. I think it's much more difficult to make it with Carney, simply because Carney was the governor of the Bank of Canada. My supposition is that if Michael Ignatieff had been the governor of the Bank of Canada, if that was on his resume, I doubt that I would have done the visiting professor routine.
Jagmeet Singh. I don't know. I don't know why we keep saying this. I feel like we have to keep qualifying this point. Johnny just burst out laughing. We just keep talking about what a nice guy he was. He was in here was such a nice guy the other week.
Yes, he is. He's a nice guy.
We spent 10 minutes talking about pizza.
I told you, man. If he was just in a different party, it's just he talks a lot of common sense.
He's just such a nice guy.
He's gracious. He's so nice.
He was interested in everybody. He took photos with everybody. Anyway, nice guy. But obviously,
you should get him to run for mayor of Edmonton. He's a nice guy.
He might win. It's wide.
He might.
It's wide open. But it appears as though this is going to be a tough night and maybe a tough stretch coming up for the NDP. And I'm just curious, generally speaking, your observations on how they got there and maybe what the future of the party might look like.
Well, Jack Layton, who, once again, full disclosure, was a good friend of mine. Now, Jack Layton is where the NDP peaked, and they actually had hopes of, becoming the official opposition, and then later perhaps even government under Layton. And of course, unfortunately, Jack Layton is no longer with us. I hope he's up there somewhere smiling right now, and maybe having a good time with this conversation. Thomas Mulcair was his successor. Thomas Mulcair was the Grand Inquisitor. He brought Stephen Harper's numbers way down, especially during that Duffy scandal. And then Thomas Mulcair was measuring the drapes, as they like to say, and thought that he would become the next prime minister. And that didn't happen because, this mythical figure, son of a former prime minister, came along, and the charisma, the personality simply swept Thomas Mulcair away, and people wanted change. But ever since then, the NDP has struggled and struggled and struggled some more. Leaders don't usually get 3 dances. They usually get maybe 1 or 2 dances before they get taken off the dance floor. This is Jagmeet Singh's 3rd and final dance.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens across the prairies. I know. Obviously that you're you have a great love for your home province of Manitoba, and obviously you've professed your love for Alberta as well. Obviously, you've spent a lot of time in British Columbia, and each of these provinces can and have sent NDP MPs to Ottawa. Alberta updated again. We're just looking at a polling aggregator, Chuck, at 338 Canada. I don't want to present this as fact. These are certainly not election results, but it has a bit of a bounce back. It shows that the pollsters predict that the NDP could preserve their 2 seats in Alberta. That would be Heather McPherson in Edmonton, Strathcona, and Blake Desjardins. We'll see what happens there, but just 2 seats projected in BC, 1 in Saskatchewan, 2 in Manitoba, and just negligible numbers. I mean, 2 in Ontario, 1 in Quebec. This is what the pollsters suggest could happen. But when you get to a position like this with the party, I guess the bigger picture is that it allows for an opportunity to kind of refocus the whole thing. And a lot of times that comes with a new leader and a new vision. You wonder, with this new political landscape and everybody talking about how Canada, and I don't believe this, and I don't, I guess I'm not trying to perpetuate it, but this idea of a 2-party race, I don't predict, or I don't expect, that Canada's political landscape for the next 15 years is going to be just 2 parties. But I would suggest this is kind of a burn it to the ground, new growth opportunity for the NDP. Where do you see the smartest spot on the political spectrum for the new NDP? Like what's missing? Is it the most progressive voters? Do they go further left? Do they try to occupy a spot in the center that maybe the Liberals aren't? Like, what do you think?
I think the NDP nationally is missing Rachel Notley. That's what I think. I think that Rachel Notley could take them to the center. I think Rachel Notley knows how to preserve the base, the union base, and other members of left-wing activists or progressive activist causes. But I think Rachel Notley also knows how to speak to business. Rachel Notley knows how to speak to small business progressive-minded people. Many people who are involved in small business, this better than anybody else, doing what you're doing for a living. There are many small businesses that are not, right-wing. They're much closer to the center, and I think Rachel Notley knows how to speak to them. I really think that it's an opportunity for her, an opportunity for the NDP. And I know that some people will bring up the piece of business about the French. Rachel Notley's French may not be wonderful, but it's incredible. When I speak to linguists over the years, it just blows me away that there's this consensus that all you need to do to speak functional whatever, it doesn't matter what language it is, you need to learn somewhere between 400 and 600 words. Rachel Notley can do that overnight. She loves doing homework.
Elias is in our live chat, says the NDP needs to align with their provincial counterparts. Says, I'm not sure that Notley is their answer federally. Wondering about maybe Wab Kinew, the current premier of Manitoba. Kind of interesting. Will says, I don't think the NDP should pull to the center. What then would distinguish them from the Liberals, which is obviously a very fair point and a fair question. I guess we'd have to wait and see if the Liberals win, what the first 100 days, what the first year of governance might look like, and how Mark Carney might establish himself. People don't really know yet. Like, I feel like Mark Carney's mission, everybody kind of knew the name. Everybody, generally speaking, knew Carney's resume, but nobody really has a sense of how Carney governs. You know what I mean?
No, I mean, it's the great unknown. But in politics, the great unknown, certainly at the beginning, can help you because, you become kind of this glass, and people fill the glass with whatever their wishes and dreams are. And so for many people right now, they're just imagining Mark Carney as a person that they see as prime minister. Once again, we're in a visual age, and he does do very well on most campaign days, not when he's doing a rally, but when he's just doing prime minister's work and people see him looking like a prime minister.
Yeah, people in the chat right now, kind of interesting. Ben says he thinks going too far to the middle is one reason why Aaron O'Toole lost. Yeah, maybe. I mean, the O'Toole experiment was kind of interesting. O'Toole kind of like swung right to win. I mean, you kind of have to do this, to be quite honest with you. He swung maybe a little bit more right, maybe uncharacteristically right for people that thought they knew him. It's kind of like the pragmatic, middle of the road kind of a guy to win the conservative leadership, and he did what he had to do. And then I think he sort of like tried to bring the ship back a little bit more to the middle and kind of earned a bit of a reputation as a bit of a wishy-washy conservative. But I don't know. There's other people in here talking about how the NDP has a propensity to let what is it? Perfect be the enemy of good. Maybe you could say this. You could probably say the same thing about every political party, and Aaron O'Toole might be an example with the Conservatives.
I think that there's a bit of unfairness going on with respect to O'Toole. A very, very smart guy and a very ethical guy. And Aaron O'Toole was ahead in the polls, and he looked to become the next prime minister until the gun issue tripped him up, and that's when things started to slide for Aaron O'Toole. So things only slid for him, I would say, in the last 14 days of the election, maybe the last 10 days. But until then, he was very credible. And once again, to the piece of business about the visual, he was very prime ministerial. There was one other sort of missed opportunity for him when Trudeau was being hounded by the Maxime Bernier folks. Remember, they were throwing pebbles at him. That was an opportunity for Aaron O'Toole to have a prime ministerial moment and to get in front of the cameras and to say that this isn't about politics, this isn't about Canada, and this is not how we do Canadian elections. And I will not support anybody. I'll support people who criticize the current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, but I will not support anyone if they wish to throw rocks at him. That's not a Canadian value.
That won't be a problem for Carney. He's a goalie, so he'll just he's going to make saves left and right.
Very well played. Kenzie in our chat says, when I said we don't know a lot about how Mark Carney governs, she says, sure we do. He shows his temper. He can't answer uncomfortable questions, and he has very little vocal support from his team.
Sounds like you're describing Pierre too.
Well, I mean, I've heard that Carney does have a bit of a fiery temper behind the scenes. We'll see. I don't know. Temper's a loaded word, isn't it? Advocates would probably use a different word, but maybe I've heard that he does have a bit of a fiery personality for sure. On the can't answer uncomfortable questions, I don't know that he can't answer them, but I do think that he found himself in a couple situations, in particular with Laura Stone from the Globe and Mail. That was that one interaction, and with Rosie Barton. Chuck, that was an interesting one. Remember when Rosie was asking Mark Carney about something about his wealth? What was it, like the blind trust or whatever? And he says, Rosie, you should look inside yourself, Rosie. Which, to Kenzie's point, was kind of like it's a little cringe. Like it's not to the point where you're like, oh my God, this guy's incinerating his political career in front of us in real time. But it was a little bit like, oh, like me, but maybe that's part of coming with it. I mean, on one hand, you've got Pierre Poilievre, who has, I think, to a certain degree, although maybe I got to take this back a little, I would say he's mastered the art of political communication. He's a very effective communicator for sure. However, in the last few weeks, the tires have been losing some air, to be honest. But I would say that still, Pierre Poilievre, a formidable communicator and a very experienced politician. Mark Carney, like, basically zero experience as an elected politician. He's been politician adjacent for many years. He understands how it all works. But I think it might be something new, obviously, to step in. You're not an MP. He wasn't a community league president. He's a guy, and then he's Prime Minister of Canada. It's kind of an interesting transition to watch.
Well, it's an interesting transition, and I have a feeling that there might be, I could be wrong about this, I'm just speculating here, but I just have a feeling there might be a kind of an anti-political wind that's blowing in this country, where people might actually feel that someone who doesn't come across as a politician is kind of refreshing.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey, Chuck, I want to ask you about just the I saw Paula Simons, your Senate colleague, post about this just a couple of days ago, and She didn't name me by name, but maybe I took it like a little bit of a gentle reminder where she was like, I'm seeing a lot of conversation on talk shows. She says, I'm seeing a lot of people talk about Alberta sovereignty and Alberta separatists. And she says it's not a thing and it doesn't deserve oxygen and it doesn't. I'm not saying I necessarily 100% agree with that, because if pollsters are correct and up to 1 in 3, or at the very least 3 out of 10 Albertans do entertain that idea from time to time and may be inclined to vote for it in a referendum, that is not nothing. 30% of a population feeling anything is not nothing. But I sure would fight like hell against it. My Canada includes Alberta, and I'm happy to have the conversation with people on the sidewalk, and I'm also happy to have the conversation on the show with the acknowledgement that we could be fanning the flames. If it's not a thing, it's not a thing. Maybe we turn the page after all of this. But over the past couple of months, it's been interesting to watch those sentiments flare up. There's been some comical sides of it. This Alberta delegation, unauthorized, saying they're going down to talk to the Trump White House about this. I mean, obviously, they're not appointed by anybody. They have no electoral reason to be down there. But what do you make of the bigger picture story?
Look, my Canada involves Alberta, and my Alberta very much involves Canada. And I've got to tell you, having worked everywhere in the country except Atlantic Canada, so let's take it, beyond I've worked everywhere west of Nova Scotia. And the truth is, I've not been in any parcel of this country. I've not been on any acre of this country where I felt more patriotism, more love for Canada than I did in Alberta. So just experientially, it's awfully difficult for me to think of Alberta as pulling out. Does Alberta have maybe 25 to 30% of the population in favor of the idea right now? An idea that hasn't really been fleshed out? Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I lived in Alberta, in 4 different decades, and there were always people who said to me they think that Alberta would be much better off on its own. And I'm not interested in suppressing freedom of expression. People have the freedom to express themselves. They do that, and there's no point. I guess I'll differ from Paula Simons on this. To say it's nothing is to dismiss something that's real, and so I wouldn't do that. She and I would perhaps have a friendly discussion about that. But she too, her motivation is no different than mine. It's a deep love of Canada. And it's very difficult for someone, no matter whether they're growing up in Alberta or Manitoba or British Columbia or anywhere in this country, to grow up feeling that deep pride in the country, especially now that our country is under economic attack. It's very difficult to hear that some people actually want to pull out of Canada. And I really think that on that, Paul and I would be on precisely the same page.
Live chat powered by Park Power. Get exclusive discounts on internet, electricity, and natural gas at parkpower.ca/realtalk. Alberta Girl says, 3 out of 10 people are angry, not smart. Dubious says you could probably find 3 in 10 Albertans who think the world is flat. I don't know about 3 in 10, but maybe. Michael says separatists are like cats. They think they don't need anybody until it's supper time and they're begging for food. And how about this one? Super Chat Ken says 3 out of 10 people riffing their frustration in a poll is not 3 out of 10 people when the shit hits the fan and real questions are being asked. I'll also acknowledge, who was it that pointed out here, Treaty 8, making the very good point, like have people considered? Here it is from Jill, separating based on what? Says, wouldn't an Albertan want to know what they're leaving Canada with? If Treaty 8 doesn't agree and keeps the oil sands, would Albertans still want to leave? These are all very fair questions, and I appreciate this. Dwayne says Peter Lougheed didn't support separation. That's the name you invoke when you want to crack the whip in Alberta. When you want to refocus the conversation, you bring it back to Peter Lougheed.
Well, of course you do. I mean, for years when people in Alberta would ask me, it doesn't matter what era we're talking about, but especially during COVID, where there was all this anti-vax business, and the anti-vaxxers really didn't appreciate my attitude about public health. And they would say to me, have you gone out there on the far left or whatever? And I said, no, I've always been a Peter Lougheed conservative. And it's true. The moment you started talking about separatism on this podcast just a few minutes ago, the moment you started that, I said to myself, I hope if Peter Lougheed is up there, he feels that there are people fighting for his vision of Alberta, because in my opinion, his vision of Alberta represented much more than 40 or 50%. We always talk about pluralities in democracy. Well, as long as you got between 35 and 40%. I think Peter Lougheed represented 90% of Albertans, and I think Peter Lougheed would have a very, very, very bad day if he felt that the people in charge of his legacy were casually and recklessly throwing it away.
Super Chat Ken, by the way, tossing $5 at us because Adler's on the show. So he's putting a couple of cold beers in the Real Talk beer fridge. Chuck, we're going to keep those cold for you the next time you visit us in person. Also wanted to shout out Les and Cheryl outside and Shelby, who have all kicked in on the Super Chat as well. We sure appreciate that as we connect with the guy I've been calling for years, the Titan of Talk, the all-time great when it comes to talk radio in Canada. And you know I had to ask you about this, Chuck. I apologize in advance. Your beloved Winnipeg Jets, they win the President's Trophy. They're first in the league, heading in with home ice advantage into the playoffs no matter who they play, with the obvious, though he's not won it yet, the obvious Vezina Trophy winner, Connor Hellebuck, the best goalie on planet Earth, shelled in back-to-back games, yanked against the St. Louis Blues, a 5-1 loss, the series even at 2. This is supposed to be the Jets' year. What is happening to your Winnipeg Jets?
I really don't understand it. I think Hellebuck is being unfairly blamed because I just don't think the defense was giving him the coverage that they know how to give him. But nevertheless, you let in goals. After a certain amount of goals, you get pulled basically for your own good, for the good of your own head. I think his head will be very much into the game on Tuesday, and I think the Jets will win. As you know, Ryan, there are two teams that I root for, the Jets and the Oilers. And I hope that either of them, naturally, Manitoban, so I want the Jets. But if the Jets don't go to the Cup, I sure as heck hope that Draisaitl and McDavid do.
We appreciate that, and we will take your well wishes. I will never forget election night 2019. You and I had an absolute blast. What a panel that was, sitting in front of, at that time, Global News viewers by the millions. You, me, Supriya, and Danielle Smith. What a panel it was. And crushing beers with you until 3 a.m. after is one of the highlights of my life. I have told the story of you, me, Brad Wall, and Danielle Smith in a cab. That's one of my favorite all-time stories. 2 premiers and 2 blowhards, a future senator in a cab at 3 a.m. How will you be taking in election night 6 years later? What does election night look like for you? Sweatpants at home? Are you going to be out and about? Where will you be watching the results come in?
No, it'll be sweatpants, and I'll be watching it watching it on the tube. And it's the most different election I've ever seen. This has nothing to do with what I'm doing for a living these days, and I'm honored to be doing it. It's just there. I don't know about you, but my guess is that everyone watching, listening to this, and you and Johnny will probably always see this particular election for a number of reasons as very, very different, an anomaly. I doubt that 4 years from now we're going to have an election like this one.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's wonderful to have you back on the show. The live chat is responding. Everybody appreciates your take on this, Chuck. Whether or not they agree with you or not, the way you articulate it, like none other. Thanks for making time for us, and we look forward to the next time our paths cross.
Thank you, and it's always great to be on with the Connor McDavid Public Communications in Alberta. Geez. Ryan Jesperson, thank you so much.
All right, my man. Thank you very much. That's Senator Charles Adler joining us on this Election Day edition of Real Talk. You can let us know what you think if you're watching or listening live in the live chat powered by Park Power. Of course, you can leave a comment on the YouTube episode if you're watching this later, and you can always send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Of course, we will have comprehensive election coverage on our next episode, on the 29th of April. Vicky Mochama is going to hang out with us for a little bit, and we've also got our Real Talk group chat roundtable locked and loaded. Again, it's going to be a great time in studio as we analyze the results. As of right now, this is all prognostication. We're looking for the meaning, man. And it wouldn't be happening without the support of Real Talk partners like our friends at the Ranch Golf and Country Club. I am so excited to let you know that they are wide open for business right now. Alberta's top public golf course, and of course, Real Talk's home course for the Real Talk Golf Classic, which is coming up Thursday, June 19th. you can go to ryanjesperson.com, click on the events link to register your team or to sponsor that tournament in support of the Real Talk Julie Rohr Scholarship. In 2021, Score Golf Magazine ranked the Ranch as offering the best value in Edmonton, second best value in Alberta, and a top 30 course in Canada. They've got weekly men's and women's leagues, corporate memberships. They've got professional instruction through the Ranch Golf Academy. And nobody has more fun out there than golfers at the Ranch. If you know, you know. And if you don't know, get your butt out there just west of Edmonton. It's my favorite track to play. You can check them out online. Take a virtual tour of the 18 holes at theranchgolf.com. Also want to shout out our friends at UCAN Youth Services doing remarkable work with vulnerable young people in the Metro Edmonton region, helping young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. You can learn more about their values, their partners, their annual report even, if you're considering a donation, by visiting ucan.ca, and take the time to check out the work that they're doing, including their relentless outreach. This is their outreach workers building relationships with and creating opportunities for 12 to 17-year-olds that are finding themselves in and out of courtrooms, in and out of juvie. They're helping these young people create opportunities for themselves to find a path of education or employment. They'll stop at nothing to be able to open those doors in hopes that young people will live independently and out of harm's way. I hope you can hear in my voice how proud we are of the work this team is doing. If you're considering an organization to build a relationship with as a donor, maybe as a volunteer, take a look at ucan.ca. And a big shout out to our friends at Athabasca University. You can find them, Canada's Open University, online at athabascau.ca with world-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. You can read more about transfer credits, the admissions process. They've also got financial supports. They've got a great initiative right now as well for people that are looking at the MBA. If you've always looked at leveling up your career, maybe you've been rolling with an undergrad degree for a while, but man, you just can't get it out of your mind, that MBA dream that you've got. Do it on your own terms, on your own pace. And of course, you can do it all online. Open your options with Athabasca University at athabascau.ca.
And without further ado, Gene Principe has got something, I'm sure. Pulsating action with Jack Michaels will be coming up here. But first of all, Johnny Infamous is the DJ in that wild scene, the Moss Pit. So let's soak up a bit of his shtick.
Thank you very much. Edmonton, it's you, me, Gene Principe, and Port Ice District.
Hello, everyone. Hey, they're raising the roof, and there is no roof, Ron, and the panel, but they did inside Rogers Place. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Ford Tailgate Party. Unofficially, we call it the Moss Pit, and they left the Moss Pit a couple of nights ago very, very happy because the team they cheer for was back in this series. It wasn't easy, but good things in life aren't easy to accomplish. That's why these fans, with some help from Johnny Infamous, let's get them going, bud. Let's get them going here. They're excited. Hey!
How great was that? Our very own Johnny Infamous, the star of the show, in the spotlight, teed up by none other than Ron McLean and the great Gene Principe. Pal, there you have it, center stage, well-deserved.
It's over. I'm done. I can retire. Ron said, it's actually the second time he's shouted me out. We talked about this last night because you went to the game, and I came back here after we all met up, and we were just laughing about it and celebrating the big win from the Oilers. But during the bubble, actually, they did a hit where Ron came in, but he said, and now take it away, DJ Infamous. I was like, that could be anybody. There's like 100 DJ Infamous. You got to say the first name. So this time I was like, they were like, what's your DJ name? Because I knew they were going to give the info to Ron. I'm like, Johnny Infamous.
Yeah, I love it. And we were, obviously, I didn't see this. after the fact because we were in the barn last night. What a game, obviously. What an absolutely wild game. Down 3-1 with like 12 minutes left. And I want to say, and I'm not taking, I do think that Leon Draisaitl had something to do with the win. I do think Evan Bouchard had something to do with the win. I'm not saying I deserve all the credit, but I did turn to my buddy Adrian next to me at the game, and I slapped him right in the chest, right on the Oilers logo, and I said, "Don't worry, bud." I said, "We got it." I said, "We got it." The faith was there. We believed, Johnny, and we believed, and we manifested. And it happened.
One thing I've learned about this Oilers team, and I'm from Ontario, where the Leafs' sadness just reigned for years. The Oilers, when they get we said this last night, you do not want to be down or up 3-1 on the Oilers.
No.
Because somehow they find a way. And I wish that last 30 minutes we could push that to like next game. Could we put that in the first period and a half instead? But I'm telling you, you do not want to be down 3-1 to the Oilers. And look at these stories. They always 180. Like everyone's hard on Bouch for the last 2-3 games. Then he goes and gets 2 goals. It's like you're living in the upside down. The thing you think is the truth about the Oilers, the very next game they're going to flip it on its head. So this is just, and now look at the Kings. I mean, it's a whole new series. It's so before my belief, I'm not going to say I didn't believe, but the belief meter, Ryan, was going up and down, and then it was kind of like 50, 40%. Now I'm like, I'm all in, 100% again. Let's go.
Belief meter.
You know what I mean? It wobbles because everyone has it. Like everyone can say, I believe, but there are times in games where you watch games where I was looking at this LA team. I was like, they look like us last year. They might go all the way. I don't know. This team's incredible. Now last night, I'm like, I don't know. Oilers figured them out now.
Yeah. Lauren is saying is professing his thanks, his gratitude to me for doing everything that I did to help the team win last night.
You did it,
Lauren. You're welcome. You're welcome. Will says Draisaitl was blessed by Jespo himself. Yes, he was blessed by Jespo himself 100%. So there you go. Goose says I was in the Sky Dome on Saturday for Metallica, and the heartbreak of Maple Leaf fans was fantastic. That from Goose, who's Lauren is calling Oilers in 6. We got a lot of optimism here, and no wonder that obviously Elias says what a win. Says nice win last night for Oilers fans. Ken pointing out, which is very true, you did actually get robbed last night. It's a little bit bullshit.
What do you mean?
Says where's Johnny's Hockey Night in Canada towel? Why did you not get Why did they not give you a Hockey Night in Canada? That's a big deal, you know. These multimillionaire athletes that could have anything they want. They could buy anything they want. They want the Hockey Night in Canada towel.
Well, now I'm going to ask for one on Thursday. I that's not something I longed for. I was just like, it's great to. I always wanted to be thrown to by Ron McLean. Like during the bubble, there was some talk, and I got close with the CCO of the NHL and the lead production director, and they're all amazing guys. They live, they breathe hockey and production and music and making it amazing. And all I said during that, I was like, I just want Ron to throw to me. That's my whole thing. And last night it was like a personal throw over, and then Gene was right there. It was just an incredible night. Like this city, this team, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, the belief, the moss pit, all of it. It's just, there's something there where like last year I thought it was going to happen. And now after last night, I'm like, maybe this is the year. Maybe this is the one that we do. Just because the adversity last year was at a level that was like, okay. But when you have a first round like this, Ryan, oh my gosh. I can't even imagine the second round because you're either going to get Vegas, who is just, our history with them, or Minnesota, who's just like, they will just collapse and play defense the whole time and piss us off.
Yeah. Hey man, it's like, to state the obvious, a 3-1 series and a 2-2 series are such different storylines.
Way different.
And I just think like when we came in, we rolled into this episode hot this morning. And because I think that like there's just energy, and a big part of that is the election for sure.
100%.
But like that last night and the way that this city is, and just even walking in to the studio today, walking up, you guys know we're like right across the street from the rink, and there's just like, I know it sounds
there's
weird.
There's a lot of zombies walking around like it's just like jerseys that are wet and just like
100%.
Did you go home last night?
I don't think they did. I think that there's either people. I was talking to a guy last night. He says to me, he goes, I just sent my EA a note that I'm going to be working remotely from home tomorrow. tomorrow. And I kind of look at
Remotely.
him. I'm like, dude, it's like 10:30 at night on the Oilers just won in overtime. He goes, yeah, well, I told her I got a sick kid at home. I said, buddy,
That's not gonna play.
you got to come clean. You got to just say, obviously, I will be working from home because I was at the Oilers game. Don't pull the sick kid card.
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
But with the 2-2 thing, I know what you mean. It's like now both teams have figured each other out. It's basically zero. We're starting from scratch now because LA thought they had our number the first 2 games. They had us figured out. Now we figured them out. Now it's like even playing field. Anyone's game. It's a best of 3, right?
Yeah, 100%. By the way, I wanted to get to a couple of notes here. I should mention Darian wrote in and was at the Polyev rally. It says, I went to the rally as expected. I think you're in Calgary, right? Says, wasn't expecting a huge turnout like Edmonton. Talking about Nisku. Remember that was the big one where they were saying whatever the number was. Let's say between 8 and 15,000, whatever it was. It was huge. Says, but it was like weekday, midday, outstanding energy. Says, you can tell, this is a report, a firsthand report from a real talker, says you can tell that Polyev's message is really resonating with the people there. He says a lot of the same things that we already know, but something, he said MPs will not be getting a summer vacation, which sounds about right. If we're in a crisis, how is it right that they would go on vacation for months while our nation crumbles and while we continue to pay taxes? Darian says, I don't agree 100% with Pierre Poilievre, but his promise to lower taxes is enough to convince me to vote for him. He says, I do understand Carney has a tax cut plan as well, but Carney also has a tax increase plan. You can't just decrease some and then tee-hee in the background increase others. You might as well leave it all the same. Have a great week, Real Talkers. He says Poilievre for PM. That Darian signing off with his firsthand report. And we have one here from Jared as well. Jared listens to Real Talk. He also listens to our friends at The Strategists. And he says, Jared does, after aggregating and weighing the Strategist Discord elections predictions channel, the predictions made thus far, I humbly submit the following election results prediction. He says, all credit to the excellent members of the Strategist community and their predictions. If I'm close, Jared is predicting 185 seats for the Liberals, which would be majority government territory, 128 for the Conservatives. We'll stack this up tomorrow. We'll see how Jared does on this.
Sure.
He's picking 22 seats for the NDP, which I think they'd probably, quite frankly, be pretty happy with right now. Oh my gosh, I fucked that up. He's not. He's giving 22 seats to the Bloc.
Oh.
The NDP would be over. They'd be buying ice cream cakes at DQ if they had 22 seats.
Only in Sherwood Park and
at Palisades, Mayo, Newcastle, and West.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. 7 seats, pardon me, 7 seats, says Jared, for the NDs, and 1 seat for the Greens. So he says, one love, happy election day, Real Talkers. That from Jared.
What would the cake, would that be the Fudgy the Whale, or what would they get there?
Well, you'd probably want to do a custom cake.
Yeah, for sure.
Depending on, you'd have to have some orange in there, but it doesn't matter. They're not going to get 22 seats, so we'll see. We'll see. But let us know. You can always let us know your predictions. And by the way, a shout out, Real Talk also has a Discord. It's called the Real Talk Community Chat, and it is available exclusively for our Patreon supporters, as well as for members of the Real Deal and Real VIP Real Talk YouTube memberships. A shout out to Real VIP Reed Clark, who's become the first ever Real VIP member.
He has moved into the studio. We've got a cot in another room.
He's got a Murphy bed from California Closets.
Full bar. We've got fruit and veggies in the fridge.
It's amazing.
Barbecue out the. We got a balcony. We built a balcony for him.
Yeah, the guy can see that. I can see the Real Talk culinary team making omelets right now, just waiting for us to wrap up this episode. There's a couple of things that I did want to mention. A bit of a hard pivot here, actually, because this is something that's tough to talk about, but we do want to make sure that we do mention it. On the 28th of April, it is the National Day of Mourning today, where we remember workers who have died, who were injured, who became ill from their job, and we commit as a nation to protecting workers and preventing further workplace tragedies. On this National Day of Mourning, I think of friends of ours, the Thiessen family, Shirley Thiessen in particular, just a remarkable human being who lost her beloved son, Jordan, in a workplace accident, as a matter of fact, on a job site not far from here, just 12 days after he was married, and just absolutely rocked that family to its core. Shirley has demonstrated incredible courage now as an author and a public speaker, helping people understand grieving, and not just her journey, but the journey of other families that are impacted by great losses like this. Today, we think of families, we think of colleagues and workplaces, and we think of the general population, people who know someone, people who are impacted by the passing of someone who died or who was terribly injured in a workplace accident, and we think of those families today on National Day of Mourning. I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that and show some love to the Thiessen family today. Real Talkers, I wanted to let you know as well, on the 14th and 15th of May, I'm going to be hosting the Nisku Energy Show. And if you're working in oil and gas, if you're working in solar, geothermal, if you're working or intrigued by nuclear energy, talk about natural gas. I mean, I'm talking from top to bottom, innovation and collaboration, the story of this first ever Nisku Energy Show, which will be highlighting the expertise and advancements shaping Alberta's future. Explore the possibilities and excellence in the heart of Alberta. This is an incredible networking opportunity, by the way, in particular on the 14th of May, but they've got a job fair going on as well, which is super cool. So no matter where you're at in your career, no matter what context your energy involvement is, if you're interested in fueling energy and innovation, you're going to want to make sure you get your tickets to the Nisku Energy Show. That's May 14th and 15th. You can get your tickets today. This is the Leduc, Nisku, and Wetaskiwin Region Chamber putting this on, and you can find them online at yourchamber.ca. We wrap first episode of every week, courtesy of our friends at Kuby Renewable Energy, in particular at Solar by Kuby, with, well, kind of a step outside the news cycle, something that maybe has absolutely nothing to do with the headlines and everything to do with filling your bucket, everything to do with positive reflections, where we eschew negativity, John. We eschew it, and we renew our faith in humanity. And today, I'm keeping it simple. Today, I want to simply look into this camera, I want to talk into this microphone, and I want to encourage my fellow Canadians, no matter where this episode finds you, to get out and vote today. I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm not telling you what should inform your vote, except for this simple fact. And I know people say this all the time, but I want you to actually sit and think about it for a second. 18, 19, 20-year-olds sat in foxholes, dodged snipers' bullets, stepped over landmines, showed incredible courage to fight for democracy. I'm not being ridiculous. I'm not being silly. I'm not being hyperbolic. This is true, and this is real, and this is a privilege that we have, that people would and have died for in other parts of the world. The privilege, the honor of participating in a democratic process to elect a government to protect our fellow citizens and to continue the path of this great nation. So regardless of where you live in Canada, regardless of the reason for your vote, or regardless of who you're going to be voting for, I want to simply put out a plea. Take a few minutes today. Step outside in your lunch hour. Give yourself 20 extra minutes as you're heading home and get out and vote. It's an honor for us to be able to do this. It's a privilege to be able to participate in a democracy with all of our eyes on the common prize, and that is peace, stability, prosperity, and a Canada that all of us are proud to call home. We're going to have you covered from top to bottom with post-election analysis on this next episode of the show, again, with the Real Talk Group Chat Roundtable and our friend Vicky Mochama. For now, we'll remind you, you can get a free solar quote by checking out kuby.ca. Friends, make it a great Monday, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory. the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.